Alright, so in this video I want to talk about order blocks. Now, order blocks are something that I've integrated more into my trading a lot recently. I've probably only been consistently trading with order blocks for a few months now, so I still don't know everything there is to know about order blocks. So this is going to be a topic that I'll revisit later once I have more experience using them. But a lot of people have been asking me about how I use order blocks, how I identify them, all that. Because I've been talking about them more in my videos, I've been trading with them more. So since people want to know how I use them, I will make a video going over how I use them as of right now. So number one, what are order blocks and how do I identify them? So I would say an order block is an area where you saw trading opposite of the trend right before an aggressive move. And I like to identify them by looking for a anomaly essentially in the trend. So you can see here I have this 4-hour order block marked out. And the reason I consider this an order block is because we had all purple candles. We were in a downtrend clearly, and we had a blue candle right before we got this aggressive move to the downside. And so number one, I like for the order block, or the candle that is opposite of the trend, to be in between two opposite candles. So we'll go with resistance order blocks because that's what I'm looking at here. So for resistance order blocks, it would be a blue candle in between two purple candles, and the purple candle to the right gets an aggressive move away from the order block. And the aggressive move away from the order block in the next candle is important because I only like for one candle to be essentially inside of the order block after it's created. So in this case, you call that blue candle the order block. There is only one other candle touching this order block, and it's the next candle that printed. And from there, we got an aggressive move to the downside. There has been no other candle since that has tapped that area. And these areas can be reactive when price finally comes back up to tap them again. And that is the reason that I look for order blocks. Don't ask me exactly why they work. My idea is that this is basically just an area where there was some trading opposite of the trend, opposite of just, all of this selling that happened. And so this is an area that traders would be willing to get involved again. That is the main reason why I think they work, just because traders are willing to trade there. And typically, the higher time frame an order block it is, the more significant it's going to be. So usually I like to mark out the higher time frame ones, and in this case I kind of made a mistake. There was a 6-hour order block that is actually larger than this 4-hour order block. So I will go ahead and change this to a 6-hour order block. When I was marking that out, I didn't realize that there was a 6-hour one here, and the 6-hour one is larger. So this is the one that I would mark out. It's a more significant area. Basically, I would include this wick, this purple candle, on the 4-hour time frame because it is a 6-hour order block. If for some reason this 4-hour order block was larger than the 6-hour one, maybe the 4-hour order block came down to here or something, and the 6-hour or 8-hour higher time frame one was smaller, I would still go with the 4-hour one just because it's a larger area, and so some people may consider the lows of the 4-hour order block to trade rather than waiting for the smaller 6-hour order block, or whatever the case is. So next, let's talk about how I use order blocks. Now, my favorite way to use order blocks is with market structure. I found that is the times that it works most often is when the order blocks agree with market structure. And by that, I mean a lot of times if you form an order block before you continue a trend. So, for example, right here we have a downtrend, which is defined by lower highs and lower lows. And we have created an order block up here before we came down to put in the last lower low. So it would make sense that if price comes up here and rejects, that this could be a valid spot to put in a lower high to continue the trend. And so you can look at order blocks as potential areas to get a retracement before a trend continues, Or a lot of times I like to look for order blocks as a potential spot for the first retest once structure breaks. So let's say, for example, price came up to break structure here, then I may look for an order block that formed down by the lows for a potential retrace target. And we do have a 12-hour order block right here. So maybe, if price breaks the downtrend here and retraces back to this 12-hour order block, it could make for the higher low in the uptrend. So that is probably the way I like to use order blocks most often is when they agree with market structure and when they're in a place that makes sense based on market structure. So, in this case, we have a 4-hour order block right here, and there's also the 6-hour order block up here. And this order block, still could be significant. I actually did take a trade from it once we kind of got a wick above it and then fell back inside of it. I am short from here, but I'm not entirely convinced that it is going to make for a lower high. I mean, it could. Maybe price only retraces like half of the move before putting in a lower high, but it may make more sense for a lower high to be put in up here, just considering it is also, kind of around the highs of a range. It is, not really in the midpoint of a range like this order block is, so, maybe this one makes more sense for a lower high. And that kind of brings me to my next point, which is Confluence with significant volume levels. So, by volume levels, I mainly mean levels inside of a range because that is what I trade most often. And while this order block isn't exactly at the highs of the range, it is pretty close to them. Whereas this order block is much closer to the value area low and the point of control of this range. However, there is a higher volume spike around this first order block, so that may be something to consider. But if this order block was at the value area high of a range, let's say maybe we continue trading here for a little while and then we come up to this order block later, and by that time the value area high has shifted, then I may put some more weight on this just being at the value area high of a range. And I also like to look for other confluences, other key levels inside of order blocks for more confidence. And, in this case, for this order block, we do have an untapped daily inside of this order block. So there is some confluence in there. There's a what I would call a reactive level inside of this order block. So maybe a specific level you could look for. And for this first order block, this has confluence with the value area low of this range with a high volume node. The point of control is right above the order block. So there is some confluence there, and there are some levels that can give me more clarity as to what price is doing. For example, we came up rejected from the point of control, and we did fall outside of the value area low for a little bit, but we have since gotten back above it. So if we continue to hold this value area low, then maybe, this short is looking less strong. But if we start to lose this value area low, then maybe I can continue to have more confidence in it. And now let's talk about invalidations for order blocks and how I like to trade them. So invalidation can be a tricky thing because a lot of people like to, enter once you start to see weakness inside an order block and maybe cover the order block with your stop loss, maybe have it a little bit higher. But something I've noticed that happens a lot is we will kind of wick above the order blocks, basically stop out everyone who has their stop losses above the order block, and then we will see a rejection. We'll kind of CDW the order block, basically grab the liquidity that's up here before getting the actual rejection. But sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes we will reject from the order block, and covering the order block with your stop was the right move. There is no exact science to it, and my invalidation usually changes depending on the trade. In this case, I entered after this wick. I entered once we started falling back inside this order block. Once we fell back below this daily level, I think is exactly when I entered. And so I covered this wick. This wick was my invalidation. But some other ways I like to find invalidations is just using the key levels that we have in the order blocks. So let's say, for example, we rejected from this daily level and then started falling back down. maybe then I would be comfortable covering this order block with my stop. It also depends on the type of trade I take. Sometimes I will look for lower time frame entries inside of order blocks. Like maybe I'll look for absorption inside the order block, so then I can cover, wherever the high is with my invalidation. Sometimes I look for a local SFP, so, again, then I can just cover the wick. It really depends, and it changes from trade to trade. And it depends on the context that I'm trading. If I am trading, let's say, this order block, and I am expecting it to be a lower high in this downtrend, then maybe the best call would be to cover the last swing point, the last market structure point. If I'm betting on a lower high being put in, but I'm not exactly sure if it's going to be in this order block, maybe we come above it to this NDPOC or something, then I might trade it more like this. But again, it really depends and it changes from trade to trade. So now I kind of want to look for some examples of times that we broke structure and retested an order block before continuing the trend. Okay, so right here is one good example. So looking at this high that we put in on April 13th, so like a month ago, we had a market structure transition when we broke this last higher low. We had put in a high, higher low, higher high, and then we got the break of structure right here. So now that we got this break of structure, let's go through the higher time frames and go down and see if we can find any significant order blocks here. And right here, the first one that I notice is this 12-hour order block. It is, the highest time frame one that I see. It's the first one that I notice going from the higher time frames down. It's a blue candle in between two purples, and the purple candle to the right got an aggressive move down. And another thing I forgot to mention, but it is more significant, at least in my experience, when the purple candle to the right comes down to break structure, or when you eventually break structure after forming the order block. So, even if this candle wasn't the one to break structure, if maybe this candle came down and then, a few candles later we broke structure, that would still be significant. But I like to look for a market structure break after the order blocks form for a little bit more confidence. And in this case, we got that. So this is looking like a very clean order block. And you maybe could have looked for some more confluence there, like maybe a volume level. We can take the volume of this area, and there's a point of control and the value area high inside this order block, so that is some significant confluence. You could also look at the fib levels, and we have a golden pocket right in there as well, so there is some significant confluence there. And so now let's just go ahead and let this play out. And as you can see, we eventually, on the low time frames, first thing that happens is we see a low time frame transition to structure. That is, just internal structure, because when you look at the higher time frames, you can't see that structure. The structure is still this. On the higher time frames, you cannot see that low time frame transition to structure, so that is just internal. But on the low time frames, we got that transition to structure, got to move right into this order block. And from there, we reject from that area. And I guess it takes a little bit of time, but eventually we get that move down to break the low and continue the downtrend. So this, pretty much worked out perfectly. We had confluence in this area. We got the market structure break afterwards. And as we retested it, we rejected and then continued the trend. And this was pretty much a perfect example of an order block, because it was, a higher time frame one. It was a 12-hour order block, and I believe it was following primary structure here. Yeah, it looks like it was. You probably would consider this primary structure here. And from there, the primary structure shifted, and we began the downtrend and then continued it once we rejected from that order block. Now, not every order block is going to be this good. And, I wouldn't expect every order block to work out this perfectly, especially if it's a low time frame order block, especially if you're following internal structure rather than primary structure. But, the idea is still pretty much the same. And just for fun, I'll let this play out and see if we maybe get another transition of structure. And we did right here. So yeah, in this 4-hour time frame, we put in this low, lower high, and then a lower low, and then we broke the last lower high. We got a transition of structure here. So potentially we could look for an order block to form somewhere in this area for a retracement target. So doing the same thing, going from the higher time frames down, I'll look to see if we have any order blocks here. And this is not an order block because there are multiple candles inside of it after it formed. So I would not consider this an order block. If it was like a higher time frame order block, you would have been able to see it on the daily, but even here, and I mean, price did technically come outside the order block, open here, and then get a move back inside of it on the daily. So maybe you would call that fill in that order block. I wouldn't trade it though. If I saw this move, this is not an aggressive enough move away from the order block for me to want to trade it. So I would still look for a lower time frame one to possibly retest after we got this more aggressive move away from it. And right now it looks like the best thing I'm seeing is this 4-hour order block. This purple candle in between two blues. The blue candle got an aggressive move to the upside, and we did not come back down to test this area yet. And this is a current NDPOC, so that's not relevant to this. It just kind of happens to line up there. But we can look at that 4-hour order block potentially for a retest. And would you look at that? We came right down to the order block. We even came outside of it a little bit, sort of grabbed the liquidity from all the people who aggressively set their stops right below this order block. And from there, let's see if we get an aggressive move back away to continue structure. And maybe we don't. We got an aggressive move back away. We pretty much came back up to the highs. But let's see if we eventually come up to continue the uptrend. And this one does not seem like we continued the trend. We did get a nice reaction from this order block, but we never came up to break this last high, so we never continued the uptrend with it. But it still gave a very good reaction, and that could have made for a very nice trade. If you were covering this low, if you were betting on the trend continuing, even though it didn't, if you covered this low with your stop loss, then this still would have been a good trade. So that is essentially how I use order blocks. More times than not, I'm using them on lower time frames. When I see lower time frame market structure shifts, that's when I tend to use them the most. And yeah, all in all, being able to use order blocks and just in general using market structure with my trading, even when we're just trading in a range, which is when I like to trade most often, you can still keep track of structure, and you can still look at order blocks for potential retrace targets. So, again, I am still not as well versed in order blocks as I would like to be. I'm still learning them. I'm still practicing using them. So this will definitely be a video that I recreate in the future. But for right now, this is how I use order blocks. All right, that is about it for this one. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. Really appreciate the support on my channel, and I'll see you all in my next video.